Hello, hello, beautiful souls. Welcome along to today's driving podcast. I just had a fabulous meetup with my dear friend Natasha, and on my world tour, and I'm busy driving back home. Um, and it's just a really beautiful time to share on some various topics. And I was guided to talk more on the problem of stress and anxiety. And this was very much a theme of my conversation with Natasha face to face for the last few hours. But it's also something that I'd like to share a bit about my own experiences with stress and anxiety. Um, and to talk a bit about my experiences with colleagues and clients and the rest of the world also. So let's talk about my experiences first of all. So if you know me, I just last week, I left my career, 26 years in software engineering and artificial intelligence. And I worked across many different industries. I started off in the power industry as a developer. I moved into um, digital CCTV, and also I went on to do internet service provider work, and I went into from there into the financial sector and worked in some of the UK's largest banks, and after that moved into digital agency and onto serious games and simulations for fire uh, firefighters or fire services, we call them here, and also into army recruitment. I had a brief stint in cybersecurity, and then I worked for the last 8 years. Um, and I don't think any of the problems that I describe about stress and anxiety are specific to any one company. I feel like these problems apply to every company. And so I don't really want to talk specifically about my experiences in each company, but I will talk about the times in my life and the effect it's had on my life. So, I first of all, what is stress? So, I would define stress as um, in a scale of 1 to 10, where one is an awareness of the kind of stress and need to have heightened awareness and focus. Uh, one being really the lowest, like really just at a stage where there's awareness of it, lightly awareness that the stress is also very low, um, and that could be a good thing. Um, and there's an aspect of stress which is excitement, feeling excited about the world and your life and the things that are going on, and that healthy level of excitement is good. But when the excitement becomes too kind of manic, so perhaps it's good up to about the level of maybe somewhere between 4 or 5, like it could out of 10, it could be quite balanced. But then after that, as it goes higher, perhaps it's much harder to cope with in the long term. So 6 and 7 could be described as quite difficult. 7 is quite difficult to maintain for long periods of time, and maybe for short periods of time, or maybe weeks or months even. It could be okay to maintain for a little while as long as the end is in sight. Um, 7 and 8 out of 10, you're really into the danger zone. Um, your body likely can't sustain that level of stress, um, and you're at risk of putting yourself your health at risk. Um, and the body starts to do interesting things. Our mind is just as much a part of our body. But for example, what I've been learning in reflexology is that the physiology aspect of us, when we're in a stress situation, we really enter this like fight or flight aspect. So kind of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 out of 10, you become increasingly into fight or flight. And you could describe 10 as like um, wondering whether you're going to die or not in any given moment. And the body, uh, when we're in the stress, these higher levels of stress are like our breathing, like becomes much more shallower and can be quite fast. Our heart rate could increase, and we can also feel um, like tightening of the lungs and chest. We can find ourselves, our posture, like sitting more like hunched over, and our brains are very like uh, hyper fixated. I was going to say hyper focused, but more fixated. Like whatever the rabbit hole is that you need to focus on in any given moments, that you kind of hyper focus on that and become quite manic about it. Often switching between different problems to solve. Um, and stress then affects almost every aspect of our body. Our digestive system can be affected. We can struggle to digest certain types of food as our body is, struggling with that heightened awareness and focus. It's harder to make time and energy to digest the more complex foods. Um, we can have a whole range of symptoms like headaches, neck, shoulder strain, back pain. Um, there's a long list. I'm not sure I remember it all, but there's a very long list of things that affect us. And if it's workplace stress, um, it can be like super overwhelming, right? Like, um, and just to be clear on my definition of stress, I feel like stress is the kind of real time version of anxiety, right? It's the stress is dealing in that given moment with the biggest problem, and it's causing you these heightened levels of stress. And of course, you can feel anxiety at the same time about what's coming in the future, but we can come on to that separately. So I'd spent much of my career, uh, certainly the first 18 years, um, trying different jobs. I did enjoy, I really enjoyed the aspects of doing technical support in my first couple of jobs. In fact, my very first job was a hybrid of doing development projects, so developing software for database software for a power billing system, and then the other half of the job was doing support. And I enjoyed that balance because I felt like I could do some of the stuff half the time. Like I could do, the kind of chaotic, get excited, focus on a customer problem, be very close to the customer, and deal with the support problem. But there was also time for kind of in some respects, is more inventive, more creative, doing development work. Like you're constantly solving problems as you build, as you write new code, and definitely a creative aspect to it. Um, and it's quite funny because we don't always think of as software engineers and developers as being creative, but really they are. Uh, we are builders, and there's every aspect of building of anything has creativity. Um, and I did experience through my life. I remember my first in the early 2000s, my first management job. Seems like a long time ago now. I struggled with the stress. I did feel emotionally mature enough to deal with the people's stress. And I realized initially I had quite a thick skin that I could cope with quite high levels of stress. Um, and I would say that I had this, to, still partly true to this day, in particular in the early stage of my career, I had this kind of delay mechanism like built in. I didn't really have a choice, but I was never really fast uh, on my feet. And what would happen is if someone like said something very upsetting to me or was very critical of me um, in the moment, I wouldn't react in the moment. And I think this gave me very quickly a reputation of being very mature and calm and able to cope in a crisis and earned me a lot of trust, even though it wasn't super voluntary. Like I just um, would find it hard to know what to say immediately. And I developed those kind of like coping mechanisms where I'd say things like, let me think about that, or I hear what you're saying, and, or maybe even, or, and I then went on and found that really what I needed to do was have a bit of a balance, be able to talk, hold conversations, and be connected to the things that people are saying, and at the same time still allow that natural distance and allow me to think about things. Um, and what I did find though is that I had relatively low self um, worth, and I did feel like I was just struggling to cope with my work hours initially. I ended up working like long hours, looking very tired and stressed, being very tired and stressed. Um, and I was working extra hours kind of as a coping mechanism, so I was like new to the management job. And that pattern continued throughout my career. Um, and I think it's a really like simple formula, I guess, that you could you could write, which would be something like um, for kind of every level of self love, every 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 lower level of self love I have, the more I put into coping mechanisms like working extra hours, because working extra hours makes me feel more productive, and when I'm productive, I love myself more. Like I don't know if I really explained that, but in summary, like the lower my self love, the more hours I work to compensate and increase my productivity or the illusion of productivity, to then allow myself to love myself enough. And that is so dangerous, right? Like I would say associating or tightly coupling your self love with anything external to you is so dangerous. And of course, self care I consider to be an expression of self love, by the action of self love. So when I love myself, I take good care of myself. I make sure today I meditate each day, that I go for lovely walks in nature, that I work, a reasonable amount of time that feels right for me, that I am calm, and yet I can be, I can have heightened awareness and productive, heightened periods of productivity when I really want to or need to. So that was fascinating to me, and I feel like just that kind of formula alone, if people, if the world understood that if you can just learn to love yourself, and I don't just mean, only the happy parts. I mean the unhappy parts too, like the whole of you. If you learn to love the whole of yourself, and that you take action with that self-love through self-care, then almost everything else in your life gets exponentially better. And when I look back at just before I went part time, so before I went part time, um, which I was for 2 years, I was on the verge of breaking. And I knew it. I was doing about 4 or 5 people's jobs at the time, and I both knew that that was true because I saw in other teams, in this big company, other teams having those roles. And then later, like after I went part time, they also hired those remaining people who also struggled with the workload, except there was 5 of them, not just me. And I was just surviving day to day. I was meditating in the mornings, which was very, very helpful. In many respects, it helped save me. It gave me an oasis in that day to look back at, as a reference point, as a guiding reference every day, and say, look, John, here's the things. Here's how you could feel. But right now, you feel really bad because you're really stressed. And if anything, it made the stress harder to deal with as well, because my body was not up for it. My body was not up for the challenge. Um, and I remember I'd feel very, very tired in the afternoons, and I'd often be working late, in part because it was linked to my self worth, and then in part because I really wanted to, um, be productive. And so, yeah, my reaction to that was I just felt, and I'd seen other people going off sick, and being really, when they were really stressed out, and either for short periods or quite often long periods, and suffering from depression. Um, and I love hearing, is it Jim Carrey or other people talking about depression and being deep rest, like depressed, and that your body needs deep rest. And it's true, like your body's basically saying, I cannot hold up this avatar anymore. I cannot keep going like this. And so your body forces you to stop. It's like a kind of mutiny of the mind, right? It's like this ship will not go on under your command anymore. Like it will self-destruct. And so there's like self-destruct protection mechanism where your body's like, no, I will manifest this illness, and this will stop us from destructing. So yeah, listen to your body, people. Your body is very intelligent and sentient, and it's a beautiful, beautiful partnership. So yeah, I felt like my body was, I was really struggling. I found physically that in my evenings I was wiped out. Like I could almost just go to bed straight away. I think some days, really bad days, because I didn't drink at that time. So I didn't drink or smoke or take drugs, so I didn't have those vices. Sometimes I'd eat, maybe I didn't binge eat a little bit, and then some days I just go for a bath. I find like a bath is one of my go-to kind of self-care. A long bath for an hour plus. It's one of my self-care actions. Or go straight to bed, wake up and just repeat. And in the weekends, we're really just coping. I would, uh, get up in the morning, do my music and stuff, and then I had like no energy to do DIY. I struggled to spend time with the family. When I was with my family, I was quite grumpy because I was tired and just had a really difficult energy. And this is also a time when I was dimming my lights, like, shutting myself down, almost like gaslighting myself, if you like. When people gave me a hard time, I was typically very submissive, and I would just take it on board. So I was taking on board other people's stress as well. And I managed quite a few people. I had 35 people at that time. Uh, yeah, so that was all hard. Um, I remember thinking that the weekends were no longer enough to recover. The evenings and weekends weren't enough to recover from work, and that I was too stressed out. And I also found that holidays, I needed more holidays. And when I went on holiday, it took me quite a long time to come out of that fight or flight mode. Um, Days, sometimes with a week's holiday, I felt like I kind of never really came out of it. So yeah, I'm just holding space for those experiences. And if you've listened this far, I'm sure you've at least at some point in your life resonated with this or know someone that is going through this right now. And I've also had times in my career when, very sadly, people have, taken their lives or lost their lives, and I've known that they were very stressed out, and you can't help but feel like that's part of their their journey. Very sadly, has been the stress and anxiety has been contribution uh, to that journey, and that also helped me, those experiences. And I've lost a lot of people in the last few years. Maybe that's partly my age at 47. But I also feel like a lot of souls are choosing not to be part of that stressful and anxiety um, culture or world. And I feel like that also helped me realize how serious it is. And it helped me reflect on, before I went part time, how serious it was for me. Like I was absolutely at the edge of, uh, you know, going off long term sick or worse. And at that time, I had no real alternative. Really, I wouldn't have had confidence to do what I'm doing now. Um, so I think also, what else did it affect my relationships? And it's definitely difficult. I was really stressed to be closer connected with my wife, and often all I was doing is, when we spoke, was like in date nights, I'd just be ranting about my work, or just venting really. And whilst I still vent sometimes, it's a really tough experience for anyone to receive. Um, and then I went part time, and that's when the difference between stress and anxiety became much more apparent to me. And so for anxiety, so this is my working pattern. My working pattern was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at work in my corporate job, and then Monday and Fridays uh, were days off. And I got paid less. I got paid 60% of what I was earning before. Excuse me. Which has its own stress, right? Like it's a huge drop in your income. Um, but I knew that I didn't want to just earn lots of money and be super stressed and unhappy. But what I did find is that arguably my anxiety increased. So what I felt was that um, on a Friday I finish. Thursday night I'd finish and I had 4 days off. So that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off. And that felt amazing, right? It felt like really, really exciting. It felt really, really good. But then what actually happened was Friday and Saturday was fine. I felt good. As soon as Sunday came, and bearing in mind that the kind of collective and everyone else around you goes through a bit of a kind of work or school fear, um, so you're kind of, and in some respects, your body's also preparing itself to ramp back up from lower levels of stress and anxiety to higher levels. And I would just, constantly have my mind about all these things. And I would say, almost without exception, my mind would I was amplifying situations at work. Ironically, one big thing was I was worried about losing my job because I knew that it was such a gift to have received this gift of being able to go part time and still have a really good income. Um, but there were costs as well. Like my role changed quite a lot, and my the job itself became a lot less enjoyable. Um, but what happened was I find myself on a Sunday and a Monday, really my anxiety levels like going through the roof. I find that really hard. And so it really felt like a case of, although I was off for 4 days, I was anxious for at least two, an ever increasing level of anxiety. And then while I was at work, in part because my anxiety was quite high, and I was like, I didn't know, what people had been up to over the last 2 working days. I was like catching up every week, and all those feelings of lack of time, lack of communication, and connecting with people were amplified. And so a lot of the reasons for me going part time actually became worse. Those problems came worse, um, and people would give me a harder time because I didn't really know what was going on for the last 2 days, and it's really hard to catch up. And also, people that worked with me and relied on me found it harder to work with me because I was there less time. So, what it did do physically is allow my body to relax more. I was getting a lot more relaxation, and so my stress levels were a lot lower on average through the week. My anxiety probably higher, and you can still have anxiety at work, right? Like while you're in kind of fight or flight mode, you can be dealing with a project deadline or a customer complaint or a manager kind of fire drill right in the moment. But you could also be anxious about what's going to happen next. And sometimes it's anxiety as simple as your job security. Feeling like if I don't do X, then I will, or Y, I will not retain my job. And if I don't have a job, how will I pay for my family's? I'm the main income earner. So that was also really tough. And some of those problems got worse and worse over time because uh, the more that, for those that were frustrated in working with me part time, if anything, they became less engaged with me. Um, and so that has its own its own anxiety too. Um, I feel like it's just talking to you about all my problems so far. But yeah, I really want to share these real life experiences transparently. Um, Also, at the same time, over the last few years, I've also been as a hobby doing client sessions for people. So doing uh, meditations, energy healing, past life regression, soul retrievals, negative energy and entity removal. And I would be doing these, so when I was working full time, I was doing them in my evenings after like a full 10, 11 hours of work, then logging on at night, doing Zoom calls with people and doing these sessions remotely. Um, that was just a lot. It was a lot. And I look back now and I see like how my body like really struggled during those times. Um, I definitely became a lot more aware of my body after I left. After I went part time, and now it's interesting. Like since I left uh, my corporate job last week, I think I'm on is it day 9 now, 9 or 10? Um, Calendar day since I left. Uh, my body, I've also I feel like I've been purging those self-limiting beliefs and self-imposed stress and anxiety. So that's really interesting. Um, I feel a lot closer to my body. I seem to notice my body a lot more throughout the day, and that's a really healthy, beautiful practice, right? Like as we talk a little bit about some of the solutions. Um, And this, today's video is not about me just preaching a bunch of stuff about solutions and selling you stuff, but it's starting to open up my mind and hopefully your mind a bit about the potential things that can help us. So yeah, connecting with my body throughout the day is really powerful. There's so many techniques you can use. Some of the simplest are just place your hand on your heart and take 3 deep breaths. And you just breathe into your nose nice and deep. And breathe out nice and loud what no longer serves your highest good. And when I do that, I see it like almost like I'm a smoker, that I'm inhaling, except I'm inhaling, instead of bad stuff, I'm inhaling the goodness, the love of the universe through my nose. And when I exhale, it's drawing out all the dark energy, all the negative energy that doesn't serve my highest good. That's why I breathe it out so loud, because the vibration of breathing out loudly and that white noise allows for the expelling of that energy. So that's something super helpful. Also, I ask parts of my body how they're doing. For example, my toes. Like, think of the part of your body that you pay least attention to and ask it how it's doing. And it's so funny because your body can give you an answer all the time, and yet how often do we ask a question of our body? Like right now, I do have a little bit of a migraine, and I asked my body, like, why do I have this? And my body said, because I pushed myself really hard yesterday. I spent maybe 10 hours doing a reflexology physiology essay, and yet I was pushing myself quite hard. And my body's like, no, like we're trying to form new patterns to try and get balance. And today I've not really started work like that yet. And by the time I get home, it'll be 3 p.m. And so I'm like being drawn to find the right balance for me. And meditation, mindfulness, like self-love, these are huge helps. But at the very core of all this, the biggest thing that I feel helps us the most, as I was saying towards the beginning, is our self-love. Like, if we truly love ourselves, so let's say, imagine that you think of yourself in the third person. Imagine you could stand outside of your body and look at yourself working. And you saw yourself sat at your desk, wherever your workplace is, and you're working so damn hard. You're working your ass off constantly, so many hours. And imagine that was your loved one, and that it was you that was making them work that many hours. Like, if you love them, if you love that person and loved yourself in the third person, you'd probably say to them, look, I love you, and I want you to work less. I want you to know that you're already enough. I want you to know that your self-love, when you put it first, allows you to achieve even greater things than you're driving so hard towards just now. You're not going to reinvent or invent the light bulb for the first time if you just keep working so hard and pushing so hard every day. You need to give yourself time to rest and receive, and that rest is productive. Rest is both an act of self-care, and it opens up your ability to receive new ideas, new innovations, new ways of working, new simplifications. And it also allows you to receive those messages from your body about how you're feeling. How's your nervous system? How's your brain doing? How's all those organs in your body doing? What are you consuming? Just allowing yourself to receive this information, reflect on it. And stop treating yourself like a robot. Just because you work 2 extra hours in a day, are you, instead, like 2 extra hours, is 10 hours more productive than 8 hours? Or is it just working for longer and an illusion of increased productivity? Or perhaps meeting the expectation of someone else? And then when we set boundaries because we really love ourselves, like when we finish for the day, when we're going to be present with our families. These boundaries are so important because they underpin the very backbone of our self-love and our self-care. And at the heart of this also is empowerment. We empower ourselves to love ourselves. We empower ourselves to take self-care, to take care of ourselves. We empower ourselves with strong boundaries that feel sustainable for us. And we empower ourselves to create space in our calendars, in our daily lives, in our busy moments. No matter what's going on around us, we create that space. And I remember someone saying to me, when you're when you're in a really difficult situation and you feel like you're failing, or you feel like perhaps even your life's under threat, is the best thing to do to keep doing what you're doing and doing it really even faster, or is it stop and think, take a look around, take a breath, and receive like the intuition, listen to your body, your guts, all that beautiful intelligence that you have inside of you, the whole of you, to listen to it and say, I need to do something differently here. This is how I innovate out of this problem. And so that's a real output for me. It made me realize that my problems are not um, about how do I work more hours. It's about how I work less. It's not about being able to work faster. It's about being able to work slower at a higher quality, greater impact. And it's not about just saying yes to everyone. It's about having really firm boundaries, because people need to know what's going to keep me in my company. One of the mandatory things for me is being able to say, these are my working hours. These are where I like to work. These are the times I work at my best. That I'm not a robot. I'm not the same as everyone else. And that, when you choose to work with me or employ me, that these are the non-negotiable aspects of me, and this is what you get. And at some point, if you ever change your mind and those things no longer align, then we're probably better, like going our different ways, not compromising my self-love and self-care. And the latter is typically what we erode the most, right? So there we go. I'd love to hear your experiences if you'd like to share any of those in the comments. And thank you so much for watching this. And I'm sending so much love from Scotland. Take care.